Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Gist, a limited podcast series powered by Energy Central covering the big, bold, and impactful technological developments in geospatial information systems that are permanently altering the modern power grid. I'm Energy Central Community Manager and your host for this series, Matt Chester. We're 7 episodes into this limited series, and we spent a good deal of time talking about different technological applications of GIS. There are a lot of them, from asset management to collaboration to infrastructure. But with all those moving parts, an obvious question arises. How do we turn a patchwork of technologies into a single cohesive model? One that's scalable, reliable, and ready to deploy. That's what we're talking about today, filling in the digital gaps with GIS technology, leveraging GIS as a central information sharing point. Because doing so doesn't just mean improving workflows, it can also mean optimizing gains for utilities across the board. And no one knows quite how impactful that is like our friends at UDC. They're experts on how utilities can design and implement tech systems that really work. And they made this episode possible today, so stick around to hear more about their work in this conversation. And with that, I'm excited to welcome Matt Zimmerman, UDC's Vice President of Systems Integration, to The Gist to tell us all about filling in digital gaps. So Matt, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. Thanks, Matt. How are you?
Doing good. I'm excited for this conversation today. And I want to start with a little bit of background, both on you and UDC. Can you share a little bit about what your main areas of focus are these days and how your team came to specialize in helping utilities modernize their digital infrastructure?
Yeah, we actually just hit our 20th year in business at UDC. Very, very proud of that. We've been truly dedicated to serving utilities. That has been our main focus. Very rich history there around everything from data collection. It's kind of our historical start was truck rolls doing data collection and then moving a lot more into the technology and the process side. And I think that's where we were able to evolve into not just taking that data and putting it into a GIS, but helping elaborate what expands from GIS into other systems. I love how you said, there's a lot of different kind of patchwork of technologies that might need to be joined together. Data is super key to that. Data is our heart and soul for utilities and where we came from. And I think that's why we were able to be so successful in helping utilities achieve more digital workflows, is because we started at the very core from the data itself. And that's what we're focused on today. We've really broadened our horizons and broadened our perspective for how we serve utilities. We've moved past just data collection. And of course, what do we do with that data? So now we're helping serve control rooms, asset management, compliance, all aspects really of the utilities asset lifecycle to deliver energy. Yeah, and natural resources. And that's what we're all about today.
Yeah, and you kind of hinted at some evolution there that's taken place. It's not been a static, here's what GIS is and here's what it does. And I know in the past you've called GIS the quote, last frontier for digital utilities. Can you explain what you mean by that and why you see design and construction areas as ones that are ripe for transformation?
I can. Yeah. The word last frontier, I really love that reference because for me, living in the West, it represents something. It represents this wide open space. And by no means am I saying it's the only digital areas that utilities are focused on is just design and construction, but is something that is wide open and giving utilities the ability to make drastic improvements to workflows, processes, technologies. That's it. That is really where a bulk of it's at. And that's why I called it the last frontier for the digital utility. As I mentioned in my blog around this, design and construction has the highest prevalence of paper usage. So if you want to talk about going digital, just look at where all the stacks of paper are building up, right? And that's typically design and construction, I think. And that's okay. As I say in the blog there, that's perfectly fine, right? And there's a rich history of why it is like that, and it gets the job done. And I'm sure we'll get into some of that, but it is the last frontier because of the amount of paper and the lack of digitization. But I think combined with the amount of vendors and institutions that are trying to improve that are on the tip of the sword to try and really give very modern solutions to these problems that paper or lacking digital technologies can provide. I really do. I think it is a huge frontier for utilities to explore.
Absolutely. And there's a lot going on there, but let's take a step back and talk about the why of it all. From your vantage point, how does embracing digital workflows improve important areas like safety, data accuracy, regulatory compliance, and operational efficiency for your utility partners?
That question really gets at the heart of a return on investment of going digital. If it's not, utilities care about all those things, keeping their employees safe, obviously keeping their customers safe. They need to follow the rules, follow the regulations. They need to, provide a good service. If going digital does not help the core of that, even if it was somewhat of a decent ROI, it's probably not going to be at the top of the stack. And that's not what we believe at UDC. We really think safety, as far as going digital, is probably one of the biggest areas of improvement. And a lot of that comes down to digital allows for a better temporal element and data quality element of things coming into systems, especially central systems like GIS and ADMS and regulatory systems. That safety of being able to say a lot closer to when and where assets exist and how they exist and what their operating models are under is very important to run safe operations for the crews and safe operations for the customers, right? It's not just about keeping the crews safe. They want to make sure that the public bodies that they inform are up to date with current information. So I think going digital, enabling faster data income and throughput from what's happening in the field over to what's happening in systems on the operations side all the way to the customer is very important. As far as other areas you mentioned, think of data accuracy, right? Going digital simply allows utilities to use more modern hardware, modern devices, phones, GPS, GNSS receivers that allow utilities to get down to the nitty gritty of where assets are really at, right? And that's, of course, when we're talking GIS and how that plays a big role. GIS matters because location matters deeply and greatly to running energy delivery systems. So by being able to go digital means you're able to capture a lot more data that's more accurate. There's a lot more metadata behind that. So the tracking, the authoritative body of information that you can collect from digital devices not only gets better, but it gets faster into the utility. I think the other one you mentioned was just around efficiencies for utilities. And I think that really just comes down to the simple art of getting rid of paper. The more digital that's what we're used to today. The more digital handoffs we get, I think utilities gain time back. They gain, it really comes down to time. With those digital transactions, you put less time into paper processing and you're able to be more efficient and more effective.
Yeah, absolutely. So it seems like there's no shortage of reasons to make that digitalization transformation. But I know, when we look at the current state of digitization across the landscape, there's still, as you mentioned, certain areas that are relying on the manual processes, and there's difficulty in transitioning to those fully digital workflows. Why do you think that remains a challenge, and why is there still in certain pockets that mix of manual and digital processes that some of these utilities are still seeing, at least for now, work for them?
I think it's a longer transition. Again, my opinion here, but from what I've experienced, a lot of the ideas and concepts of going digital, people attach this idea that it's instantaneous. Well, we should just be able to go to digital overnight or in a week or in 6 months or a year. The reality is that so much of utility workflows are part of 30, 50, even 100-year workflows that have existed for obviously a long time. It is difficult to insert 100% digitization in a process and not have so much change management that it's unfathomable to overcome. So I think that's why there's just a lot of realism that needs to be inserted into the time it takes to do a full digital process is probably longer than what people might expect based on other industries, trends that they see, work life, home life. And I think that's just a big part of it. And the other part is that, let's be honest, a lot of these operations, whether it is design, construction, compliance management, they have to be done. And so the fact that you could open up a process, gut it completely, put it on pause for 1, 2, 3 years is simply not going to happen. They've got to collect their data. They've got to get pipe in the ground. They've got to deliver before maybe the winter season or the fall season comes into play. So I think there's a time aspect of it, not just in what people think, but in the fact that there's critical operations that have to happen, and they're just not going to get gutted that quickly to go from paper to digital.
Yeah, absolutely. And the inertia, it's always so great when the change is so, daunting to some. But let's make this a little bit more tangible. And I'd love if you could share an example of a utility, and maybe you don't have to name them, but a utility that came to you all at UDC specifically to tackle some of these challenges. And what did that process look like of once you got involved and working them through it and through ultimate deployment?
That's a great question. It doesn't seem like a week goes by that we don't get some requests to support digitization. And often, I've got a great example for you on one where the utility really labeled it as modernization, but underneath that guise of being called modernization was truly an end-to-end digitization of their mobile workflows, especially around gas data collection and asset data collection. Multi-regional utility in the Midwest. I won't name names here, but they came to us asking for really an end-to-end retirement and change management of as much of their paper as possible. And what was going on at this utility, it was all the things we just talked about. But I'll add in one more factor, and actually I'll start with that one. Regulatory bodies at the state level were saying, hey, we require you now to get more accurate and more detailed about your gas asset construction, right, around your energy delivery. We've seen what happens when welds go bad, right? We know what happens in the San Brunos of the world, where, the way that pipes are put together, the way that they're welded, the way that they're built matters. It makes a big difference. So obviously there's a lot of regulatory bodies going around, specifically around gas construction. And they said, look, we don't want to be fined. We want to have a more healthy scenario around data collection, but we also want to capitalize on modern technology. And it's not even brand new technology, but using GNS receivers, using mobile devices, using BYODs in the field. It's what they're used to at home. We want to utilize some of this in the field. So they asked for more of an end-to-end process of going digital. And UDC was able to help them really rechart and re-roadmap what it takes to go through that level of change management and institutionalize a modern concept of digitization in their as-built-in workflows. Great project, and it will ultimately help that utility be more efficient, be safer, follow regulatory guidelines so they're not getting any fines. But yeah, a great example there, and it was cross-state efforts, which was pretty cool.
So we're on the gist, and so I want to kind of zoom in on the GIS function of all of this, and ask you how GIS does operate as the central information sharing hub in this bigger picture of digitalization. How does it connect outward to some of the systems that you've mentioned, things like ADMS, asset management, OMS?
GIS operates at that central hub, especially for the systems, because it is the authoritative owner of location, right? And of course, topology models, metadata, all those characteristics come into play there. Being able to see real-time systems feed into GIS has been important. But when it comes to design and construction, I'll talk a little bit about that and how that and GIS tie together. For as long as I've been doing this, I've always thought of, designing the assets, designing the new networks, making the adjustments, the changes, the abandonments, the updates to the networks. You're talking about the actual start of where data gets created. I mean, truly, kind of to make that paper metaphor, pen to paper, it is people actually creating data, lines, points, polygons that are going to ultimately end up in GIS. And on the mobile and construction side, you're talking about authoritative owners of changing or validating the accuracy of that data as it relates to location. And of course, metadata, that is the pole wood, or is it fiberglass? Is it 35 feet or is it 45 feet, etc.? All those systems going digital are feeding GIS that data, becoming more accurate and more aware. And because it is the authoritative owner of location, and obviously a lot of other characteristics of the network and topology, it is capable of feeding other peripheral system, then I actually wouldn't even call ADMS a peripheral system as a system, a mission critical system. But ADMS is counting on GIS to have the right data and to have it near real time. I think real time is we're maybe closer to it, but having true real time is not going to be there for quite a while. But if we can feed data into these systems, it is through those other systems that people sometimes interact with GIS that get those gains of safety, data governance, regulatory compliance. That is really the tie. If you can feed it faster, feed it more digital, and feed it to these other systems where people actually get to use that GIS data, that's really important. And I think that's the big tie for me.
Yeah, no, that really helps to tie it all together. And you mentioned some of the blogs that you've written, and I think one of the other terms that we came across there was preserving the design fabric as a key to reducing workflow complexity and improving data accuracy. Can you unpack that concept for us, and what does it look like in practice?
Yeah, I love that. I love that term, design fabric. Anyone that knows what really happens to get an asset built in the ground, covered up, energized, etc. It is a lot of data. It is very data intensive and data heavy. Back to one of your first questions, that's why I think it is a big frontier. There's so much data that gets collected in various devices. And what happens is all that data it takes to go from the very first time someone designs all the way to GIS, it is a ton of data. And I'm not just talking geospatial data, permits, right of ways, customer sign-offs, inspection data, pressurization data. There's a lot. At any moment, any of those data aspects that need to go to a different system or go to paper to get out to the field is a chance to kind of start to break apart and have a more complicated system to say, well, I need 5 ETL processes to go from design to paper, and then from paper to an OMS, an EAM, a work management. That it starts to get very disparate, and you have to send all this data around and have all these complex processes to cut it up and then ultimately remerge it back into GIS. If you can really keep that design fabric intact digitally, it's essentially a fingerprint that you could send to a single system and have a lot less complexity into feeding like a GIS very quickly, the whole package of that data, that design fabric. So that design fabric, unpacking it, really is meant to say there's a ton of data out there in this process, and it gets sliced up 7 ways from Sunday, goes to 7 different systems, but it's much better if you could all package it into a single box and send it to one place. It's a lot more effective to deal with. Technologies are easier to unpack that data. And overall, that's what starts to streamline the workflows.
And what can you walk me through, how you see your role in helping utilities to do that work, to piece together their tech into this cohesive, optimized flow?
That's a multi-part question. There is no one standard. There is no one standard out there today that any authoritative body is saying, hey, here's what a design fabric looks like. So without that sort of standard being in place, our role today at UDC, and I think what a lot of utility partners owe utilities, is to provide best practices and coaching and better governance around how data is collected in the field. And that means a lot. It means understanding what are all the technology choices out there? What are the best ways to put these things together to start to build this design fabric in a cohesive way? Our role right now, again, is to provide those best practices, to provide the correct links between the people, the processes, the data, and the technology that make all that line up. I think it starts with data, because every system out there, especially as we get into AI and all these other more complex operational systems, data is king. Data is it's feeding everything now. So I think that's our role, is to make sure that the right data is getting in there from the right technologies, and in a way that starts to transition away from maybe paper intensive or paper heavy processes into more digital processes.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot going on there. And as we look to wrap up our conversation today, I want to end by looking ahead. So as utilities who are listening in today, as they look to the future, what are the next big frontiers that you see on the horizon for this digital utility? What's on your radar at UDC, especially when it comes to driving more automation, more systems integration?
It's hard not to talk about the buzzword of AI. I've worked with a lot of utility executives. I know AI it's not the only thing, but I know it's on their mind. And I'm not talking about from a generative sense, right? I'm talking more about various methods that utilities are using AI for energy delivery or the management of all the resources around that energy delivery. I'm thinking about using, AI to do leak forecasting on the gas side, using AI to do help develop better rates for their customers and better demand response programs, using machine learning to do system planning, even to do as-built reconciliation coming in from the field to talk specifically about the kind of the last frontier there. AI is huge. And again, not necessarily on the generative sense. Obviously, machine learning and some of these other things have been around for quite a while. But I do think a large part of our future in how engineering, metering, system planning, inspections are going to happen, I think AI is going to play a big role in that. And we're keenly aware of certain models and ways that GIS, talking about what we're doing today, and other pieces of data can help feed some of these systems and be leveraged at utility for energy delivery. I think the other part of the future, because I don't just want to talk about AI, there's a lot more there, but when it comes to digitization, another thing we're keeping an eye on, and we talk to utility and industry executives around, is the increase of computing power on the actual grid, right? You're talking about the IEDs, the line sensors for better state estimation on the distribution side. On the transmission side, a lot more investments going on high-end line sensors. So you're talking about a lot more intrinsic computing models where it is, in-memory logic, sensor talking to sensor, and how that's helping certainly with better power flow from the transmission side and better state estimation in the distribution side. I think that level of digitization, while maybe a lot more esoteric than AI or than just, getting rid of paper, is a big area for digitization for utilities. And I think that's another big frontier.
Absolutely. A lot of good conversations to have coming ahead based on that. But for today, Matt, I just want to thank you so much for joining us on The Gist. It's been really great to hear your perspective and learn more about that next wave of truly digital utilities.
Matt, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Of course. And a big thanks to UDC for making today's episode possible. As a GIS-centric systems integrator, UDC specializes in supporting its clients' projects and programs throughout the entire lifecycle, from conception to implementation. UDC's services are tailored to utilities and infrastructure companies worldwide, offering geospatial technology solutions designed to maximize the return on enterprise digital investments. As Matt mentioned, they're celebrating 20 years, and UDC is proud to have achieved platinum status in the ESRI Partner Network program and has served over 75 utility organizations on projects related to digital design and construction, data readiness and maintenance, data acquisition, enterprise architecture, GIS technology stack implementation, utility network transformation, utility compliance management, and grid modernization, including ADMS planning and implementation. So you can connect with Matt Zimmerman and the whole UDC team on Energy Central or at their website at udcus.com to explore how to unlock the full potential of your organization's enterprise digital investments. So thanks again to UDC, and thanks to all of you for listening in today. A quick reminder, don't miss a single episode of The Gist. Hit subscribe to this feed, share an episode with a friend or coworker, and head to Energy Central for even more insights on this technology that's moving the power industry forward. We'll see you next time.